Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today for Honeybee Stamps, and today I'm sharing a flower pot card that is 5 by 7. So this is an A7 sized card, and I'm going to use the new flower pot card dies on this card. It's actually going to be a flat card with an interactive flower pot element. I die cut the flower pot off camera from some dark teal cardstock, and I'm putting some double-sided tape on the two tabs here, and I'm going to use my bone folder to fold this, or to really press those fold lines and get it scored nice and flat before peeling off the backing paper on the double-sided adhesive and assembling the flower pot. There are a couple pieces here for the flower pot. These are all from the flower pot card dies. So there's a scalloped edge that you can then put along the top of this flower pot. Plus there's the insert you can see here to the right that I've already laid out some flowers on. Let's go ahead and put the scallop trim on our flower pot. And then I'm going to decorate the trim on the flower pot with my favorite honeybee candy hearts in Be Mine, which the Be Mine color is the white color. So we're just decorating each scallop with a little white heart. I am using the glue tube to glue or add little dots of glue, and then using a crystal katana to pick these up and put them right where I want them to go. This is a fun little decorative element to a card that is mostly die cutting. Just a little bit of stamping here and there, but this is a very die cut heavy project, and so I'm trying to find little ways to add an embellishment and customize. The insert is another die from the flower pot card, and I'm not showing it right here, but I'm going to die cut two of these panels so that one of them can be the backer for this insert. This insert here is actually going to be the interactive element on the card. This is where you can handwrite your sentiment. It pulls out of the flower pot, and you'll see that here in a little bit. I did die cut 3 flowers that really line up with the insert, so it makes it very easy. There's 2 layers to each flower. I'm going to do the flowers on the left and the right first and finish with the flower in the center. These flowers were die cut from some kind of cream colored cardstock, so it's not pure white. And then I'm adding mustard flower centers to each. And we are simply assembling these to the top of the insert piece. Then also in the flower pot card collection are some leaves. And you can see I've got leaves scattered all over my work surface here. I've die cut these from some Pesto cardstock, and I'm going to tuck these then in the flowers, around the flowers, kind of everywhere. And the leaves add a fantastic touch to this and really bring the whole flower pot design to life. Now you could use the flower pot card as is. You could stick this into a regular A2 sized envelope and have a shaped card. I am taking the shaped card element and popping it onto a 5 by 7 base. And part of the reason for this today is because I'm going to have some bumblebees sticking up out of the flower pot insert on little acetate picks. And when I add these, the card's going to be much higher than A2 sized, 5.5 inches size. So I went ahead and matted everything on a 5 by 7 base to give those bumblebees room to float up above. And you'll see that here when I assemble the bumblebees. Once I have all of my leaves into the top here of my insert, you can see when it's tucked down into the flower pot how cute that is. So much fun. You can even make a little window in the flower pot if you want to, or add a layer to the insert simply by using that die that comes in this set. I opted not to use that die today. I'm playing with my elements, making sure everything that I'm using is going to work the way I think. I'm going to take the honeybees paper piecing and assemble those with the black outline over a mustard die cut bumblebee piece. Now I am showing and assembling these and adhering these to acetate picks. In a little bit, I'm going to be removing these from the top of the picks. I decided that I really felt that they needed a backing to them, and that is so I can create my own layer in between the front and the back outline. I want the wings right now are completely see-through. They're just an outline, and that's okay, but I wasn't loving it, if you will. I want to show this is how I'm adding the little bumblebee picks. So you can see they are adhered to acetate. These are just little thin pieces of acetate scraps. I keep them in a folder and trim them into thin strips when I need to create something that has the illusion of floating. They come in so handy. And so in this case, I want my bumblebees floating above the flowers in the flower pot. Back to the bumblebees, I didn't like the see-through wings, and I decided to just trim my own piece of vellum that would fit behind them, and then I can sandwich the vellum in between the two layers, the two outline layers. So I'll show you that here in a little bit. Very easy to do. In addition, there are some little eyes in any of the black outline die cut pieces. So they are so teeny tiny. I'm using a piercing tool to pop them kind of out because they did stick into the die cut piece. And I'm going to use a crystal katana to pick up those eyes and pop them in place on the bumblebees. And those little eyes really make the bees' faces come to life. And they're just adorable floating up there above the flower pot. I love that it has that illusion of floating. I have one more. I opted to use 3 today. I love that these honeybees paper piecing pieces here, or dies, are a great addition to all the paper piecing dies from honeybee stamps. And scale-wise, they work really nicely with this flower pot. So we'll add that remaining eye to our third bumblebee. And that little piece can be tricky to get, but that's where the crystal katana comes in so handy. Now we have a backing panel for this insert, and that's going to hide those clear picks and just kind of clean up the back of this panel and give it more stability. Where this is the only interactive element, or the interactive element, the card doesn't actually open. This is where you would sign your name or whatever. I felt like it was really important to make this nice and clean and really stable, so that additional layer works super nice. We are going to go ahead and start working on our sentiment. I want the recipient to know that this is an interactive card. In the newest release from Honeybee Stamps, there is a one-of-a-kind stamp set that has all kinds of fantastic sentiments and arrows and images that let the recipient know that the card does something. And there's lots and lots of options. I picked pull here, and I stamped that on the center of one of the flowers so that the recipient knows to pull and that's going to come out. It's also small, so it doesn't take away from the overall design and appeal of this scene. We're going to glue the flower pot in place onto this A7 scallop rectangle. And then I have this bloom die cut greeting. We are going to mat this on another panel or another piece and add some stamped greetings as well. While I work on some of those other elements, I do want my Nuvo crystal drops in White Blizzard that I'm adding to the center of my flowers to start drying. And so I went ahead and applied that while I work on a few other things on my card. Now I kind of wish I would have remembered I wanted to wrap some twine around the top of the flower pot before I glued it in place, but I was able to pretty easily just kind of tuck that underneath, wrap that around the top of my flower pot about 3 times, and then I can tie it into a little bow. This adds another really fun decorative touch to our flower pot. I'll get that tied into a nice little bow, snip those ends off, and look how cute this is. So I'm popping my bumblebees off. I did have to redo a couple of them, as you can see here. They stuck. But I really felt like it was important to finish those bumblebees the way I wanted. And I left it in the video because I like to sometimes share. It's not always a seamless process from start to finish. And there are ways you can fix things that maybe don't go as planned. And so this is one of those. Because they were adhered to the acetate, they are glued down pretty good, but it's pretty easy to remove them as well. Now I die cut the word bloom 3 times from that Blue Jay cardstock that I'm using for the background of my card. And I'm stacking them one on top of another, and then the outline for the word bloom was die cut from the cream or ivory cardstock. I matted it on there, and then we're going to glue this in place right to our flower pot. My bumblebees are reassembled, and I'm going to just hold them in place on a piece of vellum and cut around them. It doesn't have to be super nice and neat, just kind of the basic shape. You could also trace them onto the vellum with a pencil or something and trim around that line. I just trimmed around them. It's a little bit messy. It isn't super nice, which you'll see here when I take that off, but it's going to add such a fantastic look to these bumblebees. I really like the look of the vellum wings as opposed to just seeing straight through them. So the great thing about the bumblebees, there is a kind of a front and back to each of them. So I don't have to adhere it backwards, if you will. It's adhered the correct way because there's bumblebees. There's going to be a left facing and a right facing in the two that are kind of sideways or the side profile. So I was able to die cut those two and just put them back to back, I guess, if that makes sense. The forward facing bumblebee, I simply die cut that one twice and did that one back to back. Each of them are going to be created exactly the same. I cut out the vellum myself. That layer is not a die. I hand cut that with some scissors, sandwiched it then between 2 outlines. The back of the bumblebee might not look quite as nice because that is where it's going to be adhered to the pick, but it will definitely look better than just having the vellum on the back of this that we've hand cut. The outline on the back really disguises the fact that we hand cut that vellum piece, and you're still left with the amazing vellum wings this way. Now to finish off the front greeting for the front of our card, we are going to stamp the phrases "May Your Day" and "With Happiness." We're going to stamp those with clear embossing ink on black cardstock and heat emboss with white embossing powder before trimming into thin strips that we can then pop up with foam adhesive on our card. It's going to make our sentiment read, "May your day bloom with happiness," which is the perfect sentiment for this flower pot card and for the spring season. Very fun, and you can use the Bloom stamp set in many ways with many different greetings. So you might want to use a different sentiment with the word bloom, like "Flowers do not bloom without a little rain" is a really cute one. "Bloom where you're planted." There's just so many that will work. So lots of ways to mix and match these. I did pop up these phrases with foam adhesive. Remember that the word bloom is 3 layers glued one on top of another, so it has a little dimension to it. By adding foam adhesive behind our strips, anywhere it overlaps that word, it's going to lay a lot nicer since it's adhered with foam adhesive and not tried to be adhered flat to the card. So part of the sentiment goes below the word bloom, and the other part goes up above. Now where this strip overlaps the L in bloom, I am just going to trim the foam adhesive so that there isn't any right there. And that's going to make that lay nice and flat. And there is our little flower pot all finished. We have our insert. You could leave it just as is if you wanted to and handwrite a sentiment. I'm actually going to finish it with a little additional stamping. And then you can still there's still room to handwrite your sentiment below that or sign your name. I am stamping from the one-of-a-kind stamp set. This card is handmade with a serious amount of love. And I'm going to position these. I want to just pick all of it up with my acrylic block at one time. Stamp this with a clear embossing ink and then heat set this with white embossing powder. I went ahead and just used an acrylic block here. I've used a powder tool to help keep the embossing powder from migrating elsewhere. So once we have heat set this sentiment, we want to remember to wipe away that additional powder with a Swiffer cloth or a dry rag or a dry paper towel so that the insert looks nice and professional, finished without all of that powder. Anywhere that there might be a few little flakes of embossing powder, I remove those with a dry paintbrush. And there is our insert. I'm going to take that dry rag and just buff away that powder. We're going to pop that into our flower pot. I am matting then this die cut Scallop A7 rectangle on a 5x7 piece of white cardstock. This is just a flat piece of cardstock. You could also use a 5x7 card base if you wanted to and wanted to have a traditional card that opens. I did die cut some extra flowers using the flower pot card dies, and I'm going to tuck one bloom over to the right of the flower pot with a couple of leaves and add the last leaf over on the left side tucked behind the flower pot. This adds just a little bit extra color and interest to the design and finishes it off nicely. The last thing we will do is take the Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard and add that to the center of this last flower. Here's a look at how the card works when you pull out that flower insert. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this flower pot card that is 5 by 7, featuring brand new dies and stamps from the Honeybee Happy 4th B-Day release. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Please be sure to visit the Honeybee blog for more information. Thanks for watching.